right, Flight Sim community, this is Beetle Beast. Here we are in Flight Sim 2024, back on the ground in Hays, Kansas. Today's leg takes us a very short 37 miles away to the town of Great Bend, Gulf Bravo Delta, and once again in Kansas. So we're just going to be making a nice little Kansas trip. Power's going to be coming up. This should be a pretty quick flight. Power is set. That airspeed's alive and looking good. Alright, we're climbing. Gears coming up. Alright. Flaps are already up. I didn't put any in for this takeoff. We are limited apparently to 5 minutes of full power here with the RPM. And then we pull the manifold pressure back just for cruise. Start making that left turn, getting us en route. And hopefully today goes a little smoother. I know last time around when we were flying, we had some real big stuttering that showed up, which I found to be incredibly distracting. Hopefully this one here goes a wee bit better than that, but I guess only time will tell. We still have auto FPS on for the time being. If it doesn't fix things this time around, or if it causes more issues than I'm expecting, then it will be turned off, but I guess we'll just kind of see what happens. We're obviously doing kind of an en route climb at this point. I mean, we're doing 150 knots, only climbing at, well, we're climbing at about 500 feet per minute. So the airplane's climbing incredibly well. We're just running it full out. It's a short flight. I'll probably stop here at 3,500 and just zip across to the east. There's actually a little bit of weather that's further east than our destination, so I think what we'll try to do, I'm going to land there and then we'll start filming the next leg of this flight. As I said, I would love to see a little bit of weather and kind of put that weather radar to at least some use in the airplane. So that's going to be my game plan. We'll see what happens. All right. Bringing our RPM back. So I know 2 legs ago I had an issue where the engine died on landing, and I wasn't quite sure as to what happened with that and what caused it. I have had a couple issues where the engine seems to die immediately while you're sitting on the runway, kind of prepping to depart. It seems to happen at higher elevation airports, ones that are 3,000, 4,000 feet high. And I'm not sure 100% what caused it, but I've got a theory. I do believe, and I've mentioned it once when I swapped back to the Bonanza, that the Bonanza has full range of motion on the mixture control, whereas this one seems to be about 50% between full on and full off is like half of my mixture slider, and I have not adjusted it yet. I'm still working within those confines. But what I had noticed was, of course, those higher elevation airports, I think the engine's getting too rich and kind of flooding itself out. So it appears that the airplane, and I highly doubt that the real airplane's like this, but that inside of the sim, at least with the limitations of my current mixture range, there is a lot of variation. And if you have the mixture a little bit too rich, the airplane seems to be very sensitive to those mixture inputs, kind of causing it to essentially starve itself of air with an over-rich fuel mixture, and then the engine dies. So that seems to make a little bit of sense. We'll see if we have any more issues like that again. I know I had enriched it when we landed the other day, but we were still at an airfield that was about 4,000 feet, I think. So I had enriched it some. Obviously, we were not full rich when we landed, but I'm wondering if we had it just a little bit too much for the conditions that we were in. So that's my guess. That's what I'm going to stick with until I figure something else out. But that's kind of what I'm going with. Go ahead and turn on that radar just for the sake of argument. Like I said, I know that the weather was on the other side of Great Bend. Not much out there either. You can see a little bit here to the left. A little bit of precip, but that's very light, and that's what's showing 80 miles. Now from this altitude, how much would you actually be able to see? You'd have to be painting up towards the sky in order to really pick anything up. So, and that's what I had talked about in my previous video, that the weather radar inside of Flight Sim is omniscient. I mean, it always knows what's going on. It knows exactly what's out there. It can see everything. And that's not the case of actual radar controllers. So, like I said, there's a little bit of functionality that would have been nice to have had here. That's obviously just not included, but that's okay. It's Flight Sim, and we're doing the best we can with what we have. I'd actually be really curious to see how somebody would go about the coding process for radar, because you would have to end up encoding. So as we all know, Flight Sim 2024 and even 2020, they are incredibly CPU hungry. They love to get you CPU bound just because of the amount of data that's being built in the background, which is one of the reasons I think that they've always struggled to kind of get truly accurate aerodynamics, because it's far easier to tell an airplane or to put in some data to say this is how this airplane would fly, as opposed to actually using the computing power for fluid dynamics, right? So to make it actually behave the way the airplane would behave with regard to variations of air pressure and slipstream, etc., it's much easier to say this is what the yaw rate is, this is what the roll rate is, this is how much torque's being affected by the engine, and this is what your climb rates, min, max are, speeds, etc. And once you kind of have that, you can kind of extrapolate it a little bit if you wanted to, but it's all far from true computer simulated wins. And I think you would see something very similar to that if you actually started looking at weather inside of the sim. I've kind of complained before that the sim doesn't show storms in the way that you see them in real life. I've seen some really gnarly looking weather in this game, but it doesn't display a storm cloud properly, at least one that has, a towering cumulonimbus, right? So a storm cloud that goes up to 50,000, 60,000 feet doesn't show up properly inside of the game. Even the high storm clouds seem to be dropping out in the 30s. Now, what I can say is, of course, as a pilot, I avoid those things like the plague. I have no interest whatsoever in flying through them. I'm not a cargo pilot. I'm sure there are some cargo guys who've flown through weather that I will never touch, just because it's against everything that the way I operate my airplanes. It's just not what we do. Now, that said, the turbulence that exists inside of storm clouds can be completely unpredictable and incredibly dangerous, especially if you're looking at an airplane of this size, but they'll be dangerous for any airplane flying through major clouds with significant vertical development. So all of that said, like I said, I avoid them anyway. But to model the behavior, the turbulence of air, the updrafts, the downdrafts, the precipitation, would probably be a full-time job in and of itself, just to try to get something out there. And then if you started looking at it saying, okay, now we're going to model this radar so that the radar waves go out a certain distance, they're going out at a certain rate or a certain angle, a cone away from the aircraft, and they have to have an absorption rate based on the moisture content that you're looking at, you'd probably be looking at something that just destroys everything but the strongest CPU every day of the week. And I think that's part of why they don't do it inside of the game. So that's enough said. That's kind of what I think, and I'm going to stick to that too. Kind of like the other stuff. I may not have proof, but it makes logical sense in my mind. So until something makes more logical sense, that's what I'm going with. Getting close, 13 miles away from runway 35. We'll be curious as to what the weather's doing over there. So let's go ahead and bring up. I'd assume we'll still have winds out of the south, but we're going to find out. Oh, and FYI, I'm also on just Sim Update 3 still. I'm using the stable version of the game. I am not on Sim Update 4 Beta. I've heard people say there's really good performance in there right now. So, with that said, you know, I have thought about making that change back. I've spent a lot of time doing, what would you call them, career missions inside of the game recently, so that's the only thing that kind of keeps me from going back, because the career stuff, at least under Sim Update 3 in career, the career was essentially disabled. So I haven't decided if I'm going to go back and actually do it or not, but we shall see. So if you notice here, for our METAR, 19021 gusts of 27, 10 miles and clear, 29 degrees, 2991 on the meter. Peak wind 170 at 28. So my plan here is going to be to land on runway. So here, I think we have 35 in here, so like runway 17 over there. Should work out pretty well. 21 knots right down the pipe. And they are 1,800 feet. So something around the 2,800 foot mark should work for our pattern altitude. We'll start making that descent down there in just a couple of minutes. We do have a tower right in front of us. We'll have to watch out for that. And this is one of those airfields that is kind of set up in a triangular pattern. I'm almost certain it's an old military base. It's set up and designed like an old military training base. These things dot the Midwest. They're everywhere, especially in Kansas. And, you know, obviously Kansas has quite a lot of wind. They always have. Even a calm wind day in Kansas is probably more windy than most places on Earth. And, yeah, that said, this one here is kind of that same orientation that I'm expecting here in much of Kansas. Like I said, it's kind of common. Let's see if we can bring up a chart to show the airport. I don't know if even the FAA chart will be in here for that. Yeah, there is. Good. Got an airport diagram here. So you can see we've got these two runways here. This one here is completely closed. It's now a drag strip. Kind of neat. The other one has been partially cut off. And then this one here, of course, runway 17 is what we're going to be landing on. All the buildings should be off to the east. I think I see them right there, 5 miles away. That looks about right. Should be right in that area. So I'm going to go ahead and turn, make a bit of a right base here for the airport. The field directly ahead of us looks like a massive baseball stadium. I think it's probably a little too big to be an actual baseball field, but that's what it reminds me of. Well, the drag strip looks like it's still not a drag strip. It looks much more like a runway from here. Gear horn. So just a little bit of mixture there. Gears coming down. Car flaps are open. We're on the path. Sinking a little bit much. We'll fix that. And Great Bend traffic, this is 5883 Bravo Bravo on final for runway 17. Still sinking a little bit much. Lots of runway ahead. I think we'll use flaps 20 for this landing. This is about my proper length of flight. Let's do things that are about 15 minutes long. Alright, gears down, got wheels. Brakes are off, airplane's landing. Power's out. Nice and easy. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for watching. Hopefully you guys are having some fun in the sim. I like that length of flight. We should be doing all of our flights. It's like little 5 minutes. Let's go up, let's go down. Do love the crosswind physics. You start taking off on a crosswind runway in this game, and it's almost impossible. I'm full opposite rudder right now, just to attempt to keep the airplane going straight. They want a weather vane so incredibly strong. It's very unrealistic, but it's kind of ridiculous. So that's just my personal opinion. Anyway, like I said, hopefully everyone's having fun enjoying Flight Sim 2024. Let me know what your thoughts are. Hopefully you enjoyed the quick video and my little couple seconds of discussion. And I see some weather out there to the east, and I think we're going to go find our way through that stuff next. Tune in for the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.